In this video, I'm gonna go over the top 10 secrets or tips that you should use when running an Airbnb, okay? These things have helped me be successful at Airbnb over the years, helped me to get high returns and to mitigate a ton of risk that I see a lot of people run into when they dive into owning Airbnbs. So just a quick background on me and my experience with Airbnb thus far. Up until now, I've had about 4 different properties that I've Airbnb'd over the last 5 or so years. And I currently have 20 units under construction that will all be Airbnb. And some of them are in a few different places, but ultimately the reason that I'm building these is to replicate the process of the successful Airbnbs that I've had. I've looked at it and said, hey, if this has been successful for me over the last 5 or 6 years, how do I take the parts of it that have been successful and what are the pieces that have made it successful and how do I replicate that on a mass scale? And that's what I'm doing currently. So diving into these top 10 tips that I believe will add a ton of value to you. Number 1 is market research. Now, when it comes to buying an Airbnb or investing in a property to Airbnb, it is crucial that you do your market research. Now, a few reasons why this is important and what I actually mean by market research. 1, make sure that the city code and the permitting and zoning allows for you to actually Airbnb that property. This sounds obvious, I know, but people miss this all the time and they think, okay, I can go Airbnb this property and it's gonna produce this, or even worse, they'll buy it based on, hey, it's been an Airbnb in the past and here are the numbers that they've seen and that they've had. Well, they didn't know that it was an illegal Airbnb, and so when they buy it, they go to do it. A few months later, the city cracks down and they get shut down because they started enforcing those rules. So something to be aware of. Another thing when it comes to market research, what I mean by that is make sure where you're purchasing this property that's going to be an Airbnb, make sure that it's in a destination point. Make sure it's a place that people are going to go to. Make sure it's a place that already has a demand. So there's a few ways to do this. For me, starting out, I wanted to make sure that where I was buying a property, it was going to be a good property that I could actually Airbnb. I had no idea if I knew people went there, but I had no idea if people actually would pay enough to make the numbers work on this property for me. So a lot of it was me going into it knowing that, hey, this might not work out. And so for me, what I actually did was paid cash for the property. It wasn't that expensive. I got it for $38,000. That's another story. But the reason that I did that and paying cash for it, because you know my strategy, I'm not huge. I'm bigger into leveraging my money, and I wouldn't suggest going out and paying cash for something necessarily. But the reason I did it was because I bought it as a vacation house for me, and I wanted to make it a vacation rental, but I didn't have enough data and enough faith to go all in on it. And I didn't want to buy something expecting the numbers to work and then all of a sudden they didn't work. So part of my market research was to reach out to people that already had Airbnbs in the area, and I actually just messaged them on Airbnb. Some people were cool about it, other people weren't as cool about it, but some people just gave me information. Now, since then, I've figured out there's a website called AirDNA where you can go and you can find out based on the specs and location what it's roughly going to rent for, as well as on Airbnb they have a program where you can go in there and you can fill it out and look at the property where it's going to be, and they'll actually tell you roughly what they think you can make per month if you were to turn that property into an Airbnb. So with all of these things, just be aware that it's not going to be 100% accurate and there's going to be some variables here, but it is a good thing to kind of give you an idea of the market, as well as just make sure it's something that if one thing happens or it gets shut down, that you're not going to be stuck. So what I mean by that is I'll invest in a lot of these tourist areas, obviously because we have visitors from all over the world. If the only reason people are coming to visit is for, let's say, a business or a ski resort, I invest in a lot of Airbnbs in ski towns, right? you need to do your market research and make sure that, hey, is this place sustainable? Is this business good? Is it a good business model? Is it growing? Or is there a chance that this could get shut down and go out of business and I'm stuck with a property I paid way too much money for and I can't just rent it out to a family because they're not going to pay nearly what my mortgage is on the property. So just be aware of those things. Ultimately, if you're in a place and you're investing in a place that people are always coming to, like you're going to be good. National parks are great, right? Because you constantly have people that are visiting, not just from the US, but all over the world, coming to stay at these national parks. Probably aren't going anywhere. Okay, number 2, plan for the worst, but expect the best. Now, what I mean by this, and I gave you an example already of how I paid cash for my first Airbnb because I wasn't sure how it was gonna do. That was part of me, expecting the best, but ultimately planning for the worst. And I wasn't in a spot where I could really cover it and take care of it. So I just wanted to make sure and plan for the worst, just in case I wasn't able to rent it out and it wasn't a good Airbnb. Now, where I see people make this mistake, and this means specifically on the numbers, right? We need to make sure we're not buying a property with the best case scenario. I've seen it a lot recently. People are only advertising their last 6 months of kind of their occupancy rates and how much money they've made on these Airbnb properties. To me, it's very, very skewed because the last 6 months have been exceptionally high. With COVID, there's been more people traveling around. So ultimately, you've been able to raise your rates a little bit and more people are staying that wouldn't normally be staying. So with all that being said, I would not buy a property based on the results and the data from the last 6 months because it's skewed. It's only showing the best case scenario. So this is tip number 2, because ultimately you need to be able to understand the entire picture of it and don't always buy it with the best case scenario, making sure the numbers work. I'd also look at the worst case scenario and make sure the numbers work. And if they do that, then you're great, you're good. Everything else is just sugar on top. Number 3 is value add. Now this is different than just a normal rental property because you're gonna go in and you're gonna fix things up and maybe spruce things up in a way that's gonna attract people that are staying on a nightly version versus a monthly version. It's going to be different, obviously. There's certain things that I look for in an Airbnb when I'm going to stay there versus a house I'm going to live in and rent out. And so some of those things on an Airbnb that you might be able to value add, of course, are all of the basics as far as just making it look really nice and clean. But ultimately, how many people does it sleep? Is there a way to add more people? A lot of you guys have seen some things that I've done with this condo, for example, that was just a normal wall right here, and I was able to renovate it, value add, and I did these built-in bunk beds. They're queen over queen, right? A great way to add value to something. Now it's way more attractive because instead of being a 1-bedroom unit that can only really sleep 2 people plus 1 person on the couch, now I can sleep 6 people because there's 3 queen beds plus another person on the couch. So it didn't cost me very much money to do, but ultimately now I opened it up so many more people can stay versus just a husband and a wife or a couple that would come and stay. Now we can have families that can come and stay. So it's a wider audience that's now attracted to it. Number 4 is communication. Now, when I say communication, I'm talking about communication between you as the host with your guests and potential future guests. The reason why this is so important is because 1, it's how you get rated and how you get 5-star reviews, which are important. We're going to cover here in a second. But ultimately, it just leaves people with a good taste in their mouth. So they want to come back and stay with you again, as well as tell their friends and family about you. So some things as far as good communication go, make sure that accessing the property and getting in is very, very streamlined and seamless and smooth. Make sure that if it's a code to get in, that they have the code, it works, right? The door's not going to jam and not open all the way. One thing I always do is have a backup hide-a-key just in case, right? If the batteries went dead or something, I'm not stuck and they're not stuck, especially if it's cold or hot outside. They have a good experience. Once they come into the property, right, is there a house manual? One thing I would suggest is having a house manual that has all of the info on there as far as when trash gets taken out, everything that they need to know for moving in and staying in your place, whether it be a day, whether it be a month, whatever it is. What do they need to know? Does the hot water take a little bit longer to warm up? Anything that you can help overly communicate that's going to help solve problems for the future and help create less problems is huge. If they reach out to you, make sure to respond quick. This is part of communication, right? They want to know that someone's going to be there. One thing I always do is communicate halfway through their stay, just a quick check-in. I don't want to bug somebody and I don't ultimately want to create more work for me, but I want them to know that, like, yeah, hey, Brody was there for me as I was staying in one of his properties. Like, it was great. He checked in with us. Hey, how's everything going? Hope it's great. Reach out if you guys need anything, right? Most of the time, hey, this is awesome. Thanks so much. We don't need anything. We're good. Every once in a while, they'll have a question. We'll answer it for them, and it'll help kind of keep the communication lines open. Ultimately, like I said, just getting a greater review and having them so they'll want to come back and stay with us again. Check-in instructions, check-out instructions, all of that, like oversimplify it and make sure they understand it. One thing I always do is I send a map. As soon as they book, I'll send them a code and a map to actually get to the property. I don't need this. They can probably find it on their Google Maps or whatever, but ultimately it's one more way of communicating to help make the process as simple as possible. 5 is 5-star reviews. Now, I already talked about, having the communication, and obviously cleanliness is a huge thing for getting a 5-star review, but I just want to talk about the importance overall of 5-star reviews. And if you have questions on what is actually going into the review, location, cleanliness, you can go online and you can look up all the questions that are asked once someone checks out and how they can rate those questions. And so that's something I would suggest, because if you know what Airbnb is going to ask them going through it, it's ultimately going to help you out, because you can make sure that all of those points are covered so that you make sure and get a 5-star review. Now, the reason 5-star reviews are so important is because it makes a huge difference on, one, how your property is actually ranked when other people are searching it. Does it pop up towards the top, right? Or is it towards the bottom where people don't see it as they're looking? The algorithm is huge. So along with that also being said, something that's going to help your algorithm is how frequently you update your listing. If you're in there switching up pricing, making adjustments, it's going to show that, hey, they're making changes, they're actively involved in this listing, and it helps it rank a little bit higher. I don't know why, but it works. So something to be aware of there, but ultimately you need 5-star reviews. So what I always suggest, if you're just starting out, make sure to have your friends stay there, incentivize people to stay there, just so you can get amazing raving fan reviews as well as 5 stars. It's just going to help it rank that much better. I'll even let people stay there for free or for a huge discounted price, or hey, you only cover the cleaning fee, just so I can get that momentum going with those 5-star reviews right at the beginning, and then it's going to help it rank more. It's going to help it stay full. Tip number 6, and that is to keep it clean. Now, it's so important that you keep your Airbnb clean. I don't know about you, but when I go and stay at a place, cleanliness is everything to me. Like, I'd rather stay at a place that's not as nice, but kept perfectly clean, versus a place that's a lot nicer, but it's just dirty and not as clean. And you know what I'm talking about. If you ever go and stay at a hotel, a lot of times you're like, hey, I don't mind that this isn't, the brand new Marriott or whatever, but it's kept really, really clean. And so I'll come back and stay here again because of how clean they keep it. So the reason I bring this up, obviously it's part of how you're going to be reviewed and if you're going to get a 5-star review or not, but it just makes a huge difference. So there's different things you can do with your cleaners. Make sure quality control is in there. Make sure you're every once in a while checking in on your cleaners, making sure they're doing a good job. You want to be known for having a very, very, very clean place. Number 7 is location. Now, location's huge just because it's going to be a difference maker in if someone's going to book your property or not. One of the things that we talk a lot about when investing in real estate and just rental properties in general is location. If you're going to rent it out to college students, like, location's so important. The closer to campus, the better. If you're renting out to a family, location's so important. If it's in a dumpy neighborhood, you're going to attract dumpy tenants, right? If it's in a nice place that's close to shopping and walking distance to a lot of things downtown, you're just going to attract more people. And so the same thing goes when we're talking about vacation rentals and Airbnbs. What's gonna happen is if there's ever a time when in that area you're investing, things become oversaturated, what will happen is the ones location-wise, those are the ones that people aren't gonna rent out first. If it's further away, right, and there's too many Airbnbs, they're gonna focus on the ones that are close to where they're staying. If it's a ski resort, if it's a national park, the mistake that I see a lot of people make is, oh yeah, this is not too far from this area and I can get a really good deal on it. And a 20-minute drive isn't that bad. It's close enough that I can get this property for $100,000 cheaper. Well, that will come back to bite you because not all the time, don't get me wrong, not all the time, but ultimately location's key. So if you can advertise your place as walking distance to the ski lift or right next to the shuttle that takes you to the bus station, whatever it is, location is so important. So don't pass that up when you're looking to invest in a good, solid vacation rental. Okay, number 8 is strategic pricing. Now this is huge, and I'll tell you a few things that I've learned about this and some tips that I've gotten. Now let's stop and think about it because there's a few different strategies, right? Let's say I rent my place out for $50 a night and I rent it out for all 30 nights, right? I'm going to make the same amount of money as if I only was able to rent it out for half of that much and I only could get it rented for 15 nights, but those 15 nights I charged $100 a night. So obviously knowing this, you're gonna play around with that information. What I always do is make sure that you go through and on any major holidays, obviously Christmas and New Year's especially, and people will book a year in advance. So that was the biggest mistake I made. I actually uploaded my very first Airbnb that night. And in the morning, I was so excited I got my first booking. Well, they booked a year from now the entire 2 weeks of Christmas and New Year's because I hadn't adjusted the prices and changed the prices. And I could have charged probably quadruple and had it full of what I actually charged and what they got it for that week. So I missed out on hundreds of dollars because I wasn't thinking that way. So make sure to use strategic pricing. Now there's different apps. Airbnb has something that's called smart pricing where it'll actually price it for you. What I've found is I'm better off when I kind of do it on my own and go through and do it manually. A little tip for you is when people are searching on Airbnb for a property, let's say I'm searching for the month of May or I'm just looking at it, what's going to show up as the advertised price is the lowest price night for that month. So knowing that for me, and it's going to make more people click on my listing, I will actually go through and I'll take like a weekday, maybe like a Wednesday or something, and I'll actually lower the price. Now the chances of somebody actually going through and booking just that night, yes, it could happen. It happens. Airbnb does allow you to put a minimum night stay. Now that's totally up to you and you can look at the pros and cons of that. For me, like I just keep it a 1 night minimum. That's totally fine for me and the properties. It's worked out for what I've had so far, but I'll lower that price on that given day so that shows up as the advertised rate. So let's say it might be $36 that night and all the other nights in the month are anywhere from $100 to $150. It's going to show up as being a $36 a night Airbnb and people are going to click on it. A lot of times they'll still book. Okay. So just something to help it rank a little bit different and show up a little bit differently. Weekends are usually, I always price them a little bit higher because it's in more of demand during that time. It's all about supply and demand. That's why ultimately we're able to get away with on holidays raising the price. More people are out of school, more people are vacationing, more people are going to look to go and spend time in your area that you're investing in so you can raise the price. Number 9 is decor. Now this sounds silly, I know, but think about it when you're looking for an Airbnb and a place to stay. Decor is something that might not cost that much money, and ultimately you guys know, like I'm huge on getting a return from your investments in cash on cash return, down to renovation, down to buying a property, down to even decor, right? Is all this money on decor that I'm spending, am I going to see a return on that money? And that's ultimately for you to run the numbers and decide if that's accurate or not. But most of the time you can get a really high return on decor. If you're looking for a property or a place to stay on Airbnb and you're scrolling through all of the things, what stands out to you? That's what you want your Airbnb to look like, because whatever stands out to you is probably what's going to stand out to somebody else as well. So keep that in mind as you're kind of deciding what type of decor to put in your Airbnb. Could be something on the walls. It could be something creative that you make or that you build. Look on Pinterest for creative wood ideas. It could be something very, very simple to a little nook that overlooks the window that you have somebody come in and build for a few $100. It could just be things that you buy or you find at TJ Maxx or Target for priced pretty well that you can hang on the wall and you can stage it. For this project that I'm working on right now with a lot of these new Airbnbs, I actually hired a designer, and it wasn't cheap, but ultimately I think I'm going to get a really high return on hiring that designer, because she sent me a list of everything that I need to know as far as what to buy, as far as links on where to buy them. And she's even taken like, hey, here's a really expensive version of this, and here's kind of a mock-up of it that costs a fraction of the price, and here's where you find it. She'll even go as far as ordering all of that for me, but she sends me all these designs of like, hey, we're gonna do this on the wall, we're gonna do the faucets this color, we're gonna do the knobs this brand or this design of knobs. All these things that, like, honestly I could guess, but I'm probably gonna get it wrong. I'll actually link her info below if you guys are interested in looking for someone like that or for some help, and you can reach out. She'll probably give you a price on depending on the project, if it's a new build or an existing property and square footage and all of that. But she's been awesome, amazing to work with. It's been huge for me. Just keep in mind, like, where do you want to go stay? What does that look like? How do you replicate that process? What are some ways in terms of decor that you can bring some of the local environment and atmosphere into the house, right? Why are people going there to visit? Is it for hiking? And you can put some amazing pictures, and maybe you can collab with somebody that takes these awesome pictures and they can come and stay for free at your place. And in return, you can hang their artwork in there, right? Just thinking creative and thinking differently about this to make your property stand out. Another thing to keep in mind when it does come to decor is pictures, right? As you're looking for a property, pictures are key. And if you can't afford someone to come and take quality pictures, another great tip is to do some sort of an exchange with somebody. I'll actually have a lot of photographers reach out to me and send me a message and say, hey, I'm a photographer, I have a drone, here's some of the things that I do, here's some of my work so you can see how good and skilled I am. Are you willing to trade, a few nights stay for some good professional quality pictures? And that's originally how I got a lot of the pictures for my Airbnb, is after people reaching out, and I did a trade that way. But pictures are huge. Like, you could have an amazing property, and if you don't depict it well, people will never know. The same thing goes, you could have a property that's not as great and you can take really good pictures. Now, you guys know what I'm talking about because we've all seen Instagram these days, right? And you might meet someone on Instagram, then you meet them in real life and you're like, holy smokes, yeah, that's a filter, right? So you know what I'm talking about, and you know the importance of taking good quality pictures. Okay, moving on to number 10. This is my final tip for you guys when it comes to successfully running and operating an Airbnb, and that is to advertise elsewhere. A lot of times we call it Airbnb, but ultimately it's a vacation rental, and there's other websites that we can advertise that same vacation rental to kind of help it get more listings and more bookings. For me, Vrbo versus Airbnb, I've always had more success on Airbnb, but a lot of times I'll list them in both places, and I've done that for a while. Some of my properties just weren't doing that great on Vrbo, so I just deleted it and got rid of it just because it was one more thing to kind of manage. But it's really cool because the calendars will link together, and you can go into Airbnb and you can copy and paste the calendar into your own website algorithm, or you can list it online at, let's say, bookings.com or these other websites, right? To where you can drive traffic on your own for people to go there and book. You'll see a lot of listings nowadays on Facebook Marketplace or advertising like, hey, do you need a getaway? Instagram is huge these days for driving traffic to these Airbnbs. Another strategy you might consider is partnering with an influencer where you allow them to come and stay for free in your property in exchange for posting on their page or making a nice review with the link. So a lot of people will go and stay there because you just were able to get it out to a very, very vast audience. And now all of a sudden they want to go do and stay in the same place that somebody Instagram famous went and stayed in. So ultimately the purpose of this is just to get more people's eyes on your property. That's going to increase more people wanting to go and stay there, which is going to increase the demand, which is going to increase the price that you can then charge, which is going to increase the amount of money that you make on it and your passive income. So hopefully this helps. That's from my experience thus far, what's worked well and what hasn't worked well when it comes to Airbnb.